Listen, we only get one shot at this.
Why not live life on our own terms? Hey, are you out there? It's Tom Karadza, and on this episode of the Your Life, Your Terms show, we bring back Jeff Booth for a second time because we had such a great discussion with him the first time. We wanted to talk some more, and he was gracious enough to accept our offer. Jeff is a Canadian tech entrepreneur. He's also the best-selling author of a book called The Price of Tomorrow: Why Deflation is the Key to an Abundant Future. It's got 451 reviews on Amazon, 4.5 stars. Definitely highly recommend this book. We keep coffees in coffees? We keep coffees in the office. We keep copies of the book in the office to hand out. But if you need to pick up a copy, go on Amazon, get yourself a copy of this book. It's absolutely a fantastic read. On this episode, we wanted to ask Jeff a whole bunch of questions. And I start off with this long, meandering question that I thought was so intelligent and smart, but I ended up just talking for a few minutes in circles. But I was trying to get the point across that inflation is occurring in our economy at different rates in different categories of things. So that's what I'll start off with. And then we go into a big discussion. I had like 18 questions for Jeff. We tackled like 4 of them. I just enjoy talking with him so much. And one of the things that you should know, he is on one of the committees that advises the House of Commons in Ottawa. And I got his take on the most recent meeting and where he thought Canada was headed after being in that meeting. So listen to that. I think we get to that, maybe 15 or 20 minutes into this episode. And we talk about other things as well. Like, of course, we talk about Bitcoin, but we talk about real estate and where real estate plays a role in all our lives. Is it an asset class that we should pay attention to? And obviously, we are big fans and have a bias towards real estate. So I wanted his take on where real estate fits and what real estate does for all of us today and perhaps in the future as well. So we talk about that. We talk about a whole bunch of things, education. We also talk about how to set up your family for a possible monetary reset or a transition to a new system. We talk about central bank digital currencies and how that would roll out. And he clarified some of my own thinking on that, and the way it would be rolled out perhaps is a little differently than I had envisioned. So absolutely great conversation. And listen, we rarely ever do this. I highly recommend, if you know anyone in your life who's trying to figure out what is happening over the next few years, share this particular episode. Let's get Jeff's message on these discussions out there. So if you have someone, a brother-in-law, a sister-in-law, a friend, anyone that you think could benefit from some of these discussions, please share this episode so we together can try to help as many Canadians as possible prepare themselves for what is going to be a rather interesting decade. So if you have anyone that you think could benefit from this, please share. And we're not trying to say this selfishly by any stretch of the imagination. We just want this information shared with as many people as possible. And if you are listening to this and you are thinking that you want to include real estate as something in your life, you can come to visit one of our websites or come to one of our training classes that we do virtual now as an introductory training class. You can get access to that training class and get reports and free copies of digital books that we put up around, I'm stuttering all over the place here, around Canadian real estate investing off this website. It's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's rockstarinnercircle.com. You can get free copies of our books, reports, access to our videos. You'll get links to the podcasts like this podcast, the Your Life, Your Terms show. And on that website, you can register for a free 90-minute introductory class where we share how we are using real estate, why we are using real estate, how we are creating cash flow with real estate, the areas of the Greater Toronto area and Golden Horseshoe where we're doing that, and the strategies that we're using for real estate today in the middle of everything that's going on, how we are using real estate for our own lives. So if you want to get information in that area, you can go to rockstarinnercircle.com to get that. That's enough with the intro. Let's get on with the show.
Are you ready to live life on your terms? Is it time to take charge? Real estate, business building, the economy, health and nutrition, and more. It's the Your Life, Your Term show with Tom and Nick Karadza. Are you ready? Let's go.
Okay, we are live with round 2 with Jeff Booth. And I was just saying how grateful I am to do this with you. If anyone's listening to this and hasn't listened to our first round, I think everyone listening to this has heard you somewhere at this point, because I was just saying, I feel like you're everywhere and I feel like that's amazing. So if you haven't listened to the premise of Jeff Booth's book, The Price of Tomorrow, am I getting the title correct?
Yeah.
Price of Tomorrow.
Yeah,
The Price of Tomorrow. Check out, you got to read the book, listen to some other podcasts, and you'll get right up to speed. I'm sure we'll cover some of that here, but I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I want to ask you some different questions.
Correct.
So the first one's a little long, my little setup to it. And then some of the other questions I'm hoping are very different. But the first one, if I was to summarize the problem that I see with, or what frustrates me with life in the monetary system that we have right now, is that to me, savings should go up in value. Instead, we have assets that go up in value and incomes that don't match that. That's kind of the overall problem. So then I talk to people about inflation, and some people say, yeah, inflation is everywhere. And some people say it's nowhere. And I think I've heard you discuss this somewhere, or someone, I can't even remember. I've listened to so much stuff, Jeff, but I find inflation can be divided up because there are digital goods which can be created very cheaply with automation and different kind of labor costs spread around the world. There are different things we can buy, like the computing power we hold in our hand in an iPhone. You know, how much computing power was that worth 20 years ago? What would you pay for that type of computing power? And the cost we get that for now is like tiny compared to what it would have been before. So, and other things that you can buy very cheaply that factories can spit out, you can buy things very cheaply. So that things are going down in price in digital goods of all different sorts. But then there's a next category of goods that are things like maybe food. And food is, to buy a good steak to me right now is more expensive today than it was 10 years ago. But food overall gets subsidies, and the quality of the food decreases, in my opinion, over the last 10 and 20 years. So really it's hiding some of the inflation that's in there. Then we have another category of things like houses and real estate and fine art. And because these things cannot be created easily right now, they are really going up in value, or the dollar's decreasing. We can argue how we discuss that. But a lot of the inflation we see is not in digital goods, and it's not in food. And we can argue about quality and subsidies and the whole bit, but it's going into things like houses and real estate, because you can't create these things easily right now. And to me, things like fine art, gold even, and real estate have become monetized, in that people don't want to keep their money in their savings because they know their savings is going to lose value in cash dollars. So they look for things like fine art, real estate, gold, Bitcoin now, right? And these things have taken on a monetary thing, especially real estate. And so the value of it's been driven up. And there's this one last thing of inflation I want to talk about. And I think it was Saifedean I heard say this, or it was Michael Saylor, or it was you. I can't remember. But to retire comfortably, before, everybody's goal was to have $1 million in the bank at 10% interest. You got $100,000 a year, right? And you're happy in your retirement. And now the way interest rates are, you need $10 million in your bank account at an interest rate of 1% to retire comfortably. So there's definitely been inflation in your retirement. And the reason I'm breaking it out like this, I think we have to look at things kind of differently before we get to your bigger deflation message. And my question to you in this long buildup is, do you think over the next 5 and 10 years, real estate or things like that will lose some of its monetization and come back down in value to just what the income and the expense? I'm talking rental properties maybe now, and maybe not people. I guess we could talk about all types, but they'll just be represented for more of a truer value and not this kind of inflated value that has been forced on them by the monetary system. Did I ask too long of a question? Am I making any sense with you right now? It was a long.
You're making tons of sense. Your listeners can ask if it's too long a question.
Too long, yeah. I guess my build up to that is there's all these different things.
By the way, what you're saying is it's really confusing for a whole bunch of people, and that's really so. So they're not seeing what they would expect to see. Your savings should be. We were taught when we grew up. When I grew up. Save money, invest that, and your savings go up over time. Interest will compound interest will set you free. That's no longer true, right? We've created a system that requires our savings to be worth less over time. That's an inflationary system that we've set up. One thing though, I'd go back to the key premise of the book on is when you think that it's digital goods that are deflating and technology goods that are deflating or getting cheaper in price. It's just because they're getting in cheaper in price faster than the debasement of money. That's all that's happening. So so the rate of deflation in some of the goods is so fast because Google is free, right? Your photos today are free. We don't buy, you can't even measure GDP in your photos anymore, right? There's no GDP. So that's happening in all the digital goods, but that's the mistake people are making. They're thinking that the digital, so I would say, so they think there's these two economies, our real economy, which we can measure through GDP, and our digital economy. And the entire infrastructure layer of all economy is moving digital. So everything is on top of that. And so this conversation right now is on Zoom. We wouldn't have been able to have it before, right? But it's way bigger than that. So now if I can work at home, or I can hire people to work at home, wouldn't I hire the best labor in the world wherever they are? And that's deflationary. So it's massively deflationary. So when you think about that, you think, how is inflation, long-term inflation, going to pick up in this? And so it's not. So you're going to have constant pressure on deflation. And what's happening on the other side, because it's going so fast, is the money printing is being kind of thrown into a hole. And you're right, that money printing is, when you're printing so much money or debasing your currency, or trying to debase your currency to try to drive inflation, you're, some of the assets that will be a protection of value go up. So housing is a perfect example, but people rarely ask, and I think I said this on a number, for housing to continue to go up. Housing has only gone up over the last 20 years because there's been $185 trillion of stimulus. But people don't ask the next question, will there be another 185 trillion over the next 10 years? And for housing to continue to go up, there has to be.
There has to be.
And otherwise housing will not go up.
Correct.
It'll
Yeah.
correct. But if it corrects, if it starts to correct and you start to see deflation, it'll feed back on itself, and there will be a crash, and the entire monetary system will reset.
So perfect. This is exactly what I'm very interested in. So do you think that the government or the banking system will sit on the sidelines and not try everything in their power to stop that? Or you think they will do everything in their power, but the forces are too great and they will not?
So they will do everything in their power to stop it. So but by stopping it, the problem moves. The problem, so that, again, by stopping creative destruction in the economy, creative destruction is just moved up to the government and international monetary system level. That's what's happening. Creative destruction is happening there now, and that's why people are that are moving to Bitcoin. So they realize this is going to break. It might not break tomorrow. There might be a whole bunch more easing and everything else, but all you're doing is blowing up the balloon bigger and bigger and bigger.
And so this is really interesting to me, because we got into real estate and started Rockstar Real Estate because we thought, wow, we kind of have a handle on some of why real estate helps Canadians, because the way the monetary, this is pre our understanding of something like Bitcoin or something like that. We're like, wow, this is actually an escape mechanism in a way, because if you can get good rental properties, the monetary policies, the way the central banks set them up, are likely going to benefit property. And you mix 100%. In fundamentals into the greater Toronto area, where you have, Canada on a whole, let's face it, we get an incredible amount of high quality immigration in here. And then the population kind of moves into a big chunk of it into the greater Toronto area. They're going to move out to Vancouver. If I boil it all down, they're going to move out to Vancouver or Toronto. I know it spreads out through the country, but a big chunk lands into the greater Toronto area. So you've had these kind of fundamental.
Let me build on what you're saying.
Okay.
So because this is an international game, it's not just people look at their own game, the kind of their own monetary game in their own country, but it's an international game. So everybody knows that the Chinese yuan has to go down in value. So what do you think the people in China are thinking if they're wanting to remove their risk on
Run it
on
out, get it
currency?
out, get it out of there,
Get it out.
get it out.
Where would they put it? Our real
Canada.
estate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Our real estate, Australia's real estate all over the world, because it's been historically a really good store of value against money printing. So it doesn't matter where the printing is happening. These hot flows of money are trying to get and put it into a safer store of value than the currency. So that's what's happening. So it's not just what you're saying; it's that too, but it's also attracting that international money.
There's layers. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Got it. And then I'm just trying to think for the typical Canadian that's saying, okay, guys, like I just really want to protect my family here. And I guess this is maybe a little bit of me just trying to game the whole system here. I'm like, okay, you can own good income property because you know the government's just going to keep throwing money into the system. And that property will go in dollar terms, it might go up in value. But you have to be nimble enough to control your assets and not be over leveraged in them, and be aware there can be a sudden shift in the system, and you better have some hard money on the side like Bitcoin, because you're not going to be able to time that move really well. So you can almost play the existing system. I know this sounds horrible when I say play the existing system, but you can almost get into the assets that are in the old system, manage your debt very closely and carefully. And by the way, those assets like an income property create income for you, cash flow, which is important. But be aware that there's going to be this transitionary moment sometimes between today and let's call it 2030.
Yep.
And something like that can happen. Does that thinking just sound crazy to you?
No, that's exactly. So you just wouldn't want to have all your eggs in one basket. So for
Yeah,
people
got it.
who are
Yeah.
over leveraged, real estate is still a good store of value against this. Governments have to protect. Governments. I spoke to the House of Commons Finance Committee last
I
week.
was going to ask you. I was totally, yeah. Tell us everything. Tell us all the secrets, Jeff. Tell us them all.
So what I would tell you is, they are so far away from the root cause of this problem. That there is no chance that policymakers today do what's needed to get to the other side. And I wish I didn't have to say that, but I came away from that. Really sad for what is going to happen, because the impact of what you're saying, right, with the monetary policy today is this. Yes, there's a whole bunch of winners in real estate, but every side of that bet, if you're manipulating currency, it has a loser. There's a loser on the other side of that bet. It's not a one-way bet. And by the way, I'm a winner. You're a winner. We have real estate. We have assets, and the more assets we have, the more they go up in value. But there's a whole bunch of losers on the other side of that bet, whose rents are going up, whose or real income is going down, and they're having a hard time paying for the food, housing, everything else, and the government is stimulating like crazy, and then they're going to say, oh, we'll give you a little bit of money so you can pay for the prices that we've stimulated higher, and no one's asking where the money comes from. It's coming from our citizens. It's coming from a class of citizens who are voting for those same politicians who think they're helping, that are hurting them immensely.
It's so frustrating. But to get people to understand what you just said, it's so difficult, I find. And that's why I'm very grateful that you're out there sharing your message. I'm being very serious right now, because what you just shared, I find it's really difficult for the typical Canadian or anyone in the world to understand that. And I can't blame them, because you're living day to day. You have a family to take care of. You're working, you're buying groceries, you're paying your rent, you're paying for your mortgage. So I don't really blame anyone who needs to sit down for 3, 4, 5 months and read this stuff, which is why your book has done such a nice job of condensing that information.
Yeah.
But I find it difficult. Like, I have to throw books at people to say, please read this, and then hopefully you'll get it. And it's a difficult thing to understand.
I just talked to, I won't say it today, but it is on the podcast, but the message is breaking through to some people who are going to be driving this message forward. And it's not necessarily in the political circles. It is that message. It's not that the message isn't based on first principles and correct. Everything that I wrote in that book is still correct, and it's why it's playing out exactly as projected. Is
Even
because
faster than maybe you thought.
exactly is because when you see the world kind of what it really is, and you know what's going to happen next. So from the money printing, but now just ask yourself this: you put yourself in control. You're Trudeau today, or you're the governor of the Bank of Canada. What do you do?
Okay. I agreed. Because what do you do? So here, I have this question for you. Do you think universal basic income can be some sort of weird band-aid to get to the other side? Because even though the money has to come from somewhere, like I understand that, there's no free lunch here. It's not, you can't just give it out. But because we're stuck in a weird system, to get to the other side, can there be this weird transitionary period where it's like, yeah, the system's broken, so let's put universal basic income out to the general population till we get to the other side? And I know I don't think that's actually going to ever happen, but
I think
could
it
it?
will. I think it will happen, and I don't think, and
But
because
will it happen for that reason, or just like a different reason, just to satisfy the population that's like, hey, things are crazy?
it's satisfied.
I'm talking about using it as a strategic thing, like, okay, here's UBI, and then we'll get to the other side. But while we're giving out the UBI, it means we have to restructure things to get to the other side altogether.
So UBI makes the balloon bigger, right? So by restructuring that way, you're making the eventual fall worse. Because where does the money come from? So right now, if you're a central bank, you can actually create money out of nothing. It's just a ledger entry, and you can lend it out, right? And you make essentially a usury interest rate. You can and
It's a brilliant business.
it's a brilliant business, but that whole function of doing that is kind of creating inflation. So then, what is inflation, right? It's a hidden tax. If you own assets, inflation, your assets go up in value as a result of it, but your cash goes down in value. So people working for wages that don't own assets, they get killed by inflation. So when you hear government saying we have to drive inflation, hear that. You're driving that divide into society. Now take UBI with money we don't have. Right? There's no possible way the government could ever pay back its debt today. So they have to hide more of it in inflation. So you take more money to try to create more inflation, and you drive that divide way bigger. In fact, all you're doing is consolidating all power in government instead of the free market.
I was just hoping that there's some weird way that maybe we could use the crazy policy like that to somehow get to the other side. But yeah, I obviously agree with everything you're saying. It just seems like the fact that you're saying from the meetings you're just having that the politicians don't see the size of the problem, that it feels like it's going to be a rocky transition. And I think that's where I come from. I'm like, okay, I want people to own income streams, and even if real estate's benefiting from an old system, it'll create that income stream for you. And if you can use it correctly, you can put some of your savings into something like Bitcoin. And then you're kind of like walking both lines, right? You have assets that are benefiting from the old system, and you've put yourself into the new system. What do you think about that?
That's exactly what I would think. So Bitcoin is a lifeboat away from this, from what's happening, and it will likely peg a new system. What's going to happen? It's going to, and if governments don't peg to it, which would be the best transition. So on this transition through, imagine use business terms, right? I'm all in. I only own Blockbuster. I see where Netflix is coming, right? Wouldn't I want to own some Netflix as a hedge against Blockbuster for when it all collapses? That's Bitcoin today. So that's Bitcoin in our financial system today, and what will happen over time is a system very, very rarely changes. Even in the book, I was super hopeful. Now this is pre-COVID, pre everything else. I was super hopeful that this this conversation globally would be run up the flagpole way faster, and that you could figure out a transition so the existing system could change itself. That's what I am not hopeful at all on that.
Really? So you don't think so in the political arena in our country or anywhere, no one's reading your book, or just the incentives they have in the political system that we have, it just doesn't make sense. Like they can read your book and understand it, but to get reelected, they don't see any value there. So it's like, who cares?
So let's just, how do you, let's see, you go back.
Now we're way off track on my questions, by the way.
Let's go back to let's go back to the question that I asked you. What would you do? Because if you didn't print money right now, you would have an asset prices collapse, real estate prices, banking system. The banking system worldwide would stop worldwide if governments didn't inject more and more liquidity, and not just the liquidity they're talking about now. More next. If that stops, the whole thing resets. The whole thing.
Yeah.
So what would you do? You're given this choice. Your central bank, the bankers are telling you, no, they could take interest rates down. We have to ease because otherwise the whole thing resets. What would you do? And people one after another, the same committee meeting that I'm in the House of Commons, one after the other, everyone else hand out, I need money, otherwise this fails, otherwise this fails, one after another. So all they see all day long are more and more handouts. And then there's this crazy Jeff guy that says, we're going the wrong
let's
way.
feed everybody some medicine.
Exactly. So I understand where policymakers are stuck. They've painted themselves into a corner and it's impossible to get out. That's why I said that it is highly unlikely that they stop printing. Highly unlikely.
Could Canada, by some chance, get somebody in politics who would say, hey, we have a lot of energy burning in Alberta. Let's put some of these, Bitcoin miners on here. We have a lot of wasted energy here. Maybe Canada, I guess even that's because then I'm thinking, okay, they can still give all the handouts they want, but then maybe Canada can create some of their own reserves in Bitcoin. We have a lot of energy sources in this country. Maybe we just then on our balance sheet, just on our balance sheet for ourselves as a country. And I know I want the whole world to be successful, but now I'm talking about Canada for a second. Maybe we just mine some Bitcoin. I know Alberta is hurting right now in a bunch of different ways. Could we do that? And wouldn't that be kind of cool? I'm way off track, Jeff. I'm way off track, but I'm just throwing shit against the wall now.
But that's it. That when I use that Blockbuster Netflix example, wouldn't you want to invest in what's coming? And having, and that's the same for every single person. Investing in Bitcoin as a lifeboat away from the economic storm, but is true for every business. It should be true for every business, and it should be true for every government. The faster they understand that, the easier the transition will be. So yes.
Because could that maybe be something you bring up to them? Please. Because I think at the individual level, we can all put ourselves on the Bitcoin standard. You can create some income streams, career, if you love your career, build your own business, right? Be an entrepreneur, buy some income properties if you want, whatever it is, buy some Bitcoin as the life raft, as you're saying. We can put our businesses and ourselves, but as a country, that would be a great idea. It's up to you, Jeff. It's up to you. Get out the cape.
So here's the thing. Some of the listeners of your show probably have done the research deep enough on Bitcoin. You have, but if you talk to the general audience, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 really understands kind of the power of what this is and where it goes. And so it's just really early. I think that this is going to happen. It's going to happen in any event, but it's just still early.
Okay, let me get to and I guess I'm just trying to think of that. I guess I'll move subjects, but I'm just thinking like when the internet kind of, because I'm trying to use an example that I can see historically. I'm like, okay, when the internet kind of disrupted the telcos, they really tried to hang on, and then all of a sudden the internet just said, forget it. And the telcos kind of adjusted by selling internet instead of selling land phone lines and stuff like that. So the transition can really disrupt industries. However, people can adapt and industries can adapt. So I think anyone listening to this, there could be a monetary reset of some sort coming our way. But I think in general, we can all adapt to it as well.
So
I'm trying to paint a rosy picture. And even as I'm saying it, Jeff, even as I'm saying it, I got to tell you, I'm like, Jesus, this sounds serious.
Yeah. So there's a monetary reset coming. And the monetary reset is, if you pretend Bitcoin wasn't there, how is this normally solved? Right. So throughout history, you see governments debasing their currencies and getting more and more into the currency game. And then it's typically solved through uprisings and wars, and then a reset. That's what, and why? Because you divide, there's a whole bunch of winners created by the inflation, all of the asset owners, and a massive amount of losers that don't have the assets, and the losers come and take the assets back with pitchforks. And so look through 2,000 years of history and see that you can over.
You're right.
So without Bitcoin, I actually believe that Bitcoin is actually the only chance for a peaceful transition.
It might be. You're right. And I think part of the reason that maybe bothers me a little bit and frustrates me a little bit is I feel what we've been trying to do to help people has been get an everyday Canadian to get an income property to kind of give themselves some security. And some of them have done really well over the last few years.
Of course.
And I'm like, those people could be villain. We've talked about this briefly last time I chatted with you, could then be eventually villainized for those same, but all they did was try to protect their family and do the right thing in the system that really gave them no options. And then it's going to do a 180 on everybody. And they're going to be the asset owners, and the pitchforks are going to come. And I'm like, oh my gosh, those were the people that were just like everyone else that saw the way the game was structured. They're not the enemy.
Yeah. Or government, to keep it going, has to turn on them and say, we're going to tax this at an ungodly rate to be able to redistribute your income to those people. That's what when I said this path that we're on moves into total government control of industry. It's not a free market at all. Once you start manipulating money, and think about the barbell here. Think about the incentive structure. So you say interest rates are zero, we're going to take them negative. Any CEO in the world, or you're talking about real estate, or anything, but why would I put my money out? I have to take my money out of a bank because the government has said I'm going to destroy your cash. So I have to put it in an asset. I have to get it into something else that gives me income or return. You're manipulating policy. Same thing for a CEO. You're CEO of a business and you have a whole bunch of cash on your balance sheet. What that would say to the market is you're not the CEO for very long. Because the government has said, I'm destroying your value of cash. Why would you hold cash on your balance sheet? So those CEOs buy back their stock because it's the best thing they can do with that cash to increase the returns for their shareholders, and are left vulnerable when any single hiccup comes to the market, and they have to go back to the same government to bail out to protect all the jobs. And so you've created systemic risk in the entire system by chasing unnaturally inflation to hold it together. And you're making it worse at every different step. Not bad people. Everybody is just making their own decisions to try to protect themselves in a system that's driving inequality.
The system is broken. It's making rational actors do rational things.
Things. Everybody's making their best rational decisions.
I totally get it.
In a system that's totally broken. And so it's not bad people.
So then, and that's the beautiful thing that Bitcoin does offer, that outside your business, and if you do think you're going to be taxed, like I'll tell you, Nick and I think I told you before, but before March of this year, we didn't have any Bitcoin. And now we personally are very aggressive into Bitcoin, and our business, our own treasury for Rockstar Real Estate is very aggressive into Bitcoin. So this is one of the ways as business owners, we're looking at the same thing as you. I don't know how any of us are really going to avoid the taxes that I think are coming all our way. You know, you're going to have to on anything, equity in a property, maybe an excessive profit in a business. Like I think the government is going to be so eager for revenues that I think they're going to be coming in taxes in all sorts of ways that we don't know.
Exactly.
So you agree.
I totally agree. The truth is, though, that even the whole the taxes are there for a redistribution of income. Most of the government revenue comes from inflation and debt creation, right? So it's and when you can play this game and print money for nothing and hide it and tax citizens with a hidden tax through inflation, they don't see it. And actually, ironically, if you just say the thing on my book, what's happened is technology is moving so fast, trying to make things cheaper and bringing a whole bunch of goods for free or almost free, that they lose those tax revenues too. They lose so for a long time you didn't see that hidden tax, right? And my parents, their houses went up slowly over time. We thought merrily around everything works. Right? We're in the system, measuring all the results from the system. It's only until technology started to exponentially move that you saw an exponential money printing on the other side, exponential debt creation and money printing on the other side. And now you can see it. Now you can't hide that from society anymore. People are starting to poke at it and say, "Oh my God, what's happening?"
Okay, so that was my first question, and got us trying there. That was a half an hour on the first question here. I have another one for you that's kind of related. I want to get your tech. I want to use your tech background for a tech question here in a second. But do you think central bank digital currencies somehow marginalize governments? Because if central banks can then be the ones who are putting money or dollars directly into citizens' hands, and commercial banks become customer service departments for that mechanism, and do commercial banks and the government somehow get marginalized, and central banks become the primary people we answer? I don't want to say we answer to, it sounds horrible, but just have more power than they even do today. Can that happen?
So not central banks necessarily. Actually, central bank effectively objectivity moves to treasury and government's control. Because
okay, got it. So you think it just becomes one almost?
Because citizens demand governments to give them more money. So it's that's why I say concentration of power into governments. When you talk about central bank digital currencies, today why M2 is collapsed is because so the money velocity has collapsed is because no matter what today, if a central bank takes bad assets off a balance sheet of a bank and holds them on the central bank and then gives them free money that they can lend out at, the banking institution still today is good quality businesses to lend against. So one of the reasons that you've seen a collapse in M2 is because there's not enough good businesses to lend against. So what central bank digital currencies do, the next step of this kind of treasury hijack the independence of a central bank, and then the government becomes in the distribution game. And so, but it also at the same time, if you think about how that plays out on the existing system, which is a given, it will happen on the existing system. And then it also means that the central bank, once you're on a digital currency that's by the central bank, they could take interest rates to -6 overnight and pick your pocket. Right? But if you're using it, and that is the power of it. But also, if you think about watch the signposts that are happening right now, for the longest time, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, all of these banks, hedge funds, and everything else were completely against Bitcoin. Why are they for it now?
It's their escape mech.
They've been the biggest beneficiaries of central banking policies because they've had access to the free money. But they can see the next step now. And the next step is their competitors. They can.
So you
So
think, no, no, no. Okay,
once the central bank digital currency comes in, and the transfer mechanisms to society doesn't need to be the bank, then the bank is a competitor to that transfer mechanism, because so far they've been the transfer mechanism to get that money to society through loans. When that isn't required anymore, the last part of the free market dies with a whimper, and their competitors. So why you're starting to see all of these central banks, or sorry, not central bank, banking institutions starting to embrace Bitcoin, is they know they have to.
So yeah, okay, fascinating. Because do you think then that everyone's fear about being a Bitcoin possibly, and I'm not talking about any of the other cryptos right now, Bitcoin specifically, wouldn't be outlawed by the government because the lobbyists from the banking sector will lobby hard to keep that particular Bitcoin, free?
Bitcoin will not be.
And is that why though? Because you think the commercial banks will put pressure because they're the donors. Let's face it, they're putting a lot of money into Congress in the U.S. and into our government here.
They have to now. You saw Mass Mutual yesterday.
Yeah.
So your first insurance giant to putting in $100 million into Bitcoin. It's
so we're past the Rubicon here.
We're past the Rubicon. We're past it.
Because that's a lot of I think people's fear. Like, I'm not really going to go because it'll be outlawed. And I'm like, with everything I'm seeing, I think we're past that. But okay, got it. But I never looked at it from that angle, which I appreciate, that the commercial banks are really this is their new world, so they're going to protect it, or they're going to do everything they're possible to protect it.
They have the bullseye on their back. Central bank digital currencies no longer need a bank.
Yeah. I was thinking central bank digital currencies almost marginalize government and the commercial banks, but I see what you're saying. If the treasury merges with the central bank, that becomes the mechanism. I was just thinking even crazier that, it'll just be the central bank deciding everything. They don't even need the government, but I get
it's the government that is
Okay. So then I have another question for you. Do you think there's so right now, if I wanted to do business with you, I can incorporate a company in Canada. You can incorporate, and our businesses trust that incorporation, and we do business together. But I have relatives over in Croatia. I have friends in the US. Wouldn't it be nice that I can incorporate in a jurisdiction that maybe was via a smart contract of some sort on a distributed ledger of some sort with a layer above Bitcoin and some mechanism where I could have a contractual corporation, a set of documents that you trusted in and I trusted in, and now we don't need a national jurisdiction to do business together, because I could say, oh yeah, you're a corp as represented on this tech layer out on the network. I'm a corp here. We can start doing business together, and almost supersedes kind of nations or the way we set up corporations now. Because I'm like, that's a very interesting world, because now I can transact a little bit differently. And I don't think governments will necessarily like that kind of thing. But do you think that could be possible as a layer on top of Bitcoin? And I think you might know better than me. I'm just learning about the Lightning Network right now. I'm just picking up on the Lightning Network and what's happening there. So you think this is possible?
It's happening.
Okay.
So two paths right now. Governments pegged to Bitcoin, and I know some of this to some of your listeners will sound crazy because it's still out there some way, but I believe the probability is almost 100% that the government's either pegged to Bitcoin, and then they could still have their own currencies on top and control the kind of access points to it, and some of the innovation around the secondary layer would slow down, or governments band together to try to ban Bitcoin, and that's so improbable because they would have to agree on a fixed currency measure that look like Bitcoin to be able to do it in an environment today that is completely no trust. And
I feel like it'd be a little bit like whack-a-mole trying to keep it down, right? Because it would pop up in a jurisdiction that would still allow it, and then your whole game theory explanation comes into effect. But I'm taking you off course. Keep going. Sorry.
So if you think about what some of the governments, World Bank, IMF, everything else, when you hear the Great Reset, think about that's what they're thinking. They're great.
And do you think really pegging to
No.
something?
So they're not thinking big to Bitcoin.
Got
They're
it.
trying to think we're going to create something and wipe a whole bunch of stuff out and keep the game going. That's what they're thinking. But Bitcoin's moving too fast. So if everybody got together fast enough, their digital currencies all came together fast enough, and they could create the rules of the game fast enough, then there's again, super low probability, but let's just say they could do that really quickly, and they could fix society and everything else, and then Bitcoin would slow down, right?
Yeah, got it. When I hear you say it like that, I'm like, yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah, not going to happen, right? So that's why I say super low probability, but it's worth talking about every
Totally.
single different so, but even in that environment, what would happen is the second level, the second layer of Bitcoin, the Lightning Network and everything else, and all the payment the entrepreneurs trying to race to protect their value in this entity that is Bitcoin, thousands, millions of entrepreneurs racing to be able to do this, would make sure it's a medium of exchange too. And so that means the amount of innovation that you don't see that's happening on the Lightning Network today, or the second layer of Bitcoin and the payment processing onto that is staggering. It is. Look up Jack Mallers. I
heard you mention it, I think, with Preston on his podcast, and I immediately I couldn't find that particular podcast. I'll look it up. It's a podcast where he's interviewed somewhere.
Yeah, he's by Pomp.
Okay,
Pomp,
got it.
yeah,
Okay.
And Pomp is an investor in the company.
So anyone listening to this will find that podcast and put it in the show notes here, along with links, Jeff, to your book and stuff. But we'll link to that podcast. So if anyone, because the Lightning Network is just a layer, I shouldn't say but it's a layer on top of Bitcoin that's allowing a lot of other functionality to occur.
Exactly. Marty Bent does a lot of good stuff on the Lightning Network. And remember Jack Dorsey, Square, they're going to be all over this as well. There's a whole bunch of innovation coming to the secondary level of Bitcoin. So today it's the primary use is as a store of value against gold, right? It is a better store of value than gold. That's the primary first hill it's winning. The secondary use, if governments kind of push hard and try to ban it, it'll move really quick into society.
Okay, so this idea, so with this other innovation that's happening at a quick pace, you think there will be a time where we are doing transaction contractually at a tech layer that maybe doesn't exist today, but could be in our near future?
Imagine having all of this capability on your phone.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
There's no technology reason that it isn't. Now, I know people who look at Bitcoin today and say, okay, the on-ramps are hard, the off-ramps are hard, I got to store this key and everything, self-storage.
But that's where I feel like we're headed. I'm right, because if you see the way the internet went from 1996 to 2006,
yeah.
Like in 1996, I could barely load a web page. I think I was probably still using dial-up in 96. Yeah, probably 96. Yeah, I think dial-up. 2006, I was selling software at NetSuite that went public for $1 billion.
Right.
That's a 10-year. So from dial-up to sell, where people told me at NetSuite that nobody would store their accounting information in the cloud. Yeah. No one would do that. That was the objection. Now that's not even the consideration. So if we move 10 years from today, it's staggering. So that's why I believe what you're saying. If you had to, not that I doubt you, Jeff, not that I doubt you, not that I doubt you, but I'm on board. I'm on board is what I mean. And so if you had to pick a time frame for a possible where governments, things are priced in Bitcoin. If you had to throw a dart, could you, because I didn't believe how things could be priced in Bitcoin in any quick manner until I started hearing, I think it was Marty Bent talk about energy, some of these data mining centers that are building mining, kind of like a 10-foot by 10-foot rig of Bitcoin miners and putting them on like methane gas things in Alberta that are not being used. And then it just kind of hit me. I'm like, oh my gosh, when energy gets to be priced in Bitcoin, because the guys in China mining it versus the guys in Alberta, Canada mining it versus the guys in Texas mining it, they're all going to want the same thing to measure that energy cost. And then I'm like, holy smokes, the petrodollar system's at
Well,
risk here.
that's what's happening, right? So the petrodollar system is at risk here.
Which is like that's, and I believe that. And that's just such a huge statement. For anyone listening to this, the petrodollar system basically came into play in the 1970s when the US made I'm summarizing here, made an agreement with Saudi Arabia to say, hey, price your oil in dollars. We'll protect all the shipping channels and be the police of the world. I know I'm summarizing there pretty quickly, but that's a big,
that's pretty good. And it's a way that the US could control, have their currency back to around the world, and a fiat currency taken at face value around the world without gold. So it was the next step after gold. They went off the gold reserve, and then the next is get everybody to price energy in US dollars.
which was, when you look at it, was a brilliant stroke. Like, we can all argue whether the good or bad, whatever that was, but it was it's definitely smart move.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if I had to ask you, then I just want to check the time here. If I just wanted to ask you, if you had to throw a dart where things start at the government level being priced in Bitcoin, or energy level around the world, what, things are denominated in Bitcoin, or a time frame even. And I know it's tough because it could be slow, and then it could be overnight. But,
so that's what I think that's what's happening. It's happening at a pace that's faster than, because remember, one system, there's a lot of people make this mistake in business. They think two systems can coexist, and they can't. One takes the other, right? So a lot of times a monopoly can work for a long time. Use Blockbuster Netflix as an example, right? Or use Kodak and the digital camera as an example. The systems can't coexist. One becomes, and arguably they could, but one becomes so small, or take.
It becomes meaningless almost.
When we grew up, how many people said, why are we killing Main Street? Walmart, get out of here. But we went to shop at Walmart. Or Costco.
Yeah, good point.
And Main Street gets way smaller because the economics of distribution change and the economics of marketing change. So as one system becomes bigger and takes most of our attention, the other one, as a byproduct, gets smaller. So if you think about what's happening with Bitcoin today, that system is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's tiny in the grand scheme of what the economy looks like. But it's getting bigger, and it is built on a network effect, and it's getting more powerful and more powerful and more powerful. So at what point, and remember, as that's happening as a store of value today, and more people are starting to trust it, the same thing is happening over on the other side to the exact, less people are trusting the existing system. And so the existing system, because less people trust it, has to work harder and try to print more. So this money that's racing into Bitcoin is being taken from the existing system. So picking the day that changes, it's too hard to pick a day. But what I can say, it's already written in stone. It's going to happen.
So anyone listening to this, so someone who's maybe new to this or thinking about this for their family, next time I'm going to ask you more than 3 questions, I promise you, because I feel like I have all these questions for you. I'm getting through none of my questions, but I enjoy the conversation so much, so I appreciate it. If someone listening to this, what could they do from an education point of view, whether they're young? Yeah, let's take somebody coming in, a young adult coming into the workforce in the next few years. Maybe they're in university right now. We can all talk about whether university, the education system and all that. What would you think someone should do to prepare themselves for the next 10 years? Is it get educated in a certain thing, or, be resourceful, just general principles? What would you say to somebody who's in their 20s right now and to prepare for this world?
Curiosity, drive, and think in first principles. Realize most of the things you read, you'll want to read the things that you believe in, agree with. It's easier for your brain to digest.
And you feel smart when you read something you agree with. You're like, I knew that.
And you'll hang around with a whole bunch of people that'll feed back that same thing, and you'll be caught in a bubble where you might not look deep enough. So the things that why do you know something is true? Because somebody else told you, or because it's true? So you use this inflation example. Why is inflation good? There's a whole bunch of people that think inflation is good and the government's going after 2% inflation is a really good thing. And they've never asked the question, is it good and why? So they've never done the work to be able to say, to go down the rabbit hole to understand. For people that are willing to do that and understand why in first principles, and then understand, okay, now I know, not I guess, not I have an opinion, I know for fact this is the way things look. And that has a whole bunch of consequences. Those people control the world. Those people can do anything they want.
Yeah, you're unstoppable.
You're unstoppable because you're learning at a rate that is that's incredible. I've said this on a couple of podcasts. Education today is free. It's already free. We just don't know it's free. So we go for 13 years in school, and then another 4 years, and then another 4 years. And why do we do that journey? Because it's an archetype of a past that we think we're going to get a better job at the end of that journey. Where today, with an internet connection, if you have drive, determination, curiosity, you can learn anything. Like this content you're putting out is free. And the people could disagree with the content or kind of ask that content, go deeper and deeper and deeper, and kind of, but you can get to the best professors, you can get to the best PhDs, all for free today, if you choose to put your time there and learn. So learning is still critical. A learning rate is really great. What could you do? You could do that. On that path, you'll see how fast technology is changing the rules in every business. And I'm wildly excited about some of the businesses that I'm involved in, and that when you know how to construct businesses that create value, and remember, the only way for a business to succeed is it has to create value for society.
As it should be.
As it should be. So when you know how to construct that and use technology to be able to kind of go against the grain where everybody else is, you can create crazy value for people and crazy value for yourself or your business as a result. One of my businesses 18 months ago, it started sales. It's doing $10 million a month right now. There's another company I'm chairman of in food security and food. Look up Cubic Farms. Watch what.
I think you mentioned them before, actually. Yeah, is it going well?
Watch what's going to happen. Watch what's happening. Just watch.
Cubic Farms is the ability to grow. Well, can you summarize it instead of me trying to stumble through it?
So again, most of food risk comes down to giant supply chains where you have to have giant track farming, high pesticide use to make sure the farm doesn't fail, low cost labor to be able to pick this, and really low margins against environmental damage and everything else to be able to get our food to us. And so there's a whole bunch of fragility in that system. So this company invented this technology that can drive commercial scale farming in a container, where they call it a cube, and they can localize it for cheaper than all of that, but way higher quality, no pesticides, anything else, abundance. And so what's happening as a result, it's still early, it's still relatively early, but this is a public company. Watch it. Watch what's going to happen.
Can you tell us one other company that maybe, I don't know if you want to release a name, but it's just something else that to give everyone something to think about, just a different one that comes to mind?
You've talked to Addy.
Yeah. Okay. That's another great one. Of course. Yeah.
Another one. But again, technology companies that are changing the rules to use technology to give people who were blocked out of something. So they essentially lower the cost, to be able to allow a whole bunch of people who couldn't participate into something a way to participate.
And for anyone listening, just to jump in there, Addy, both Steve and Mike from Addy have been on this podcast if you haven't listened to it, and they're opening up real estate investing where you can invest into a property or a project for as little as $1. And they actually cap the investment size to make sure enough people can get into it, which is democratizing the ability to buy real estate and own real estate, which is like a few years ago you wouldn't even think about that kind of stuff. So yeah, incredible stuff that they're doing. And Jeff, I'm trying to slip in another question here.
Okay,
I
go
want to
ahead.
be
Yeah,
aware of the
yeah,
time.
go ahead. Yeah.
But so a family though, so young people, curiosity and kind of develop that drive and keep exploring and reading and learning. I love that. What about for a family who's in their late 40s or somebody in their early 50s who maybe is in a career? Because we see some of that here, Jeff, where somebody's been in their career for a long time and they don't like what they see in the future. Maybe that industry is going to be crushed and they know it. You know, how would they prepare for the next 10 years? So to us, what we've been trying to help people do, you know, is to have this, you know, help them buy some assets that are maybe going to go up in value. And then now when we learn about things like Bitcoin, share that Bitcoin message to have one foot into both worlds, as we discussed. That's one thing we try to do. And what would you share?
The beautiful thing about what you do, the reason I said yes to your show again, is I believe you. Like, you actually do care about people.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, thank you.
And you do a really good job, right? For a real estate player like yourself to look deeper and then also advise Bitcoin, like not a lot of people.
We've been told we're crazy. Yeah, people.
Yeah, exactly. Not a lot of people do that. But you're right. And that's, so if you're 40 or if you're 50 years old and you have a bunch of cash in the bank, RRSPs and everything else, and you know it's being devalued, you have to get away from that devaluation somewhere. And I think I said this on your last show. A lot of people miss this devaluation because they denominate their entire net worth in a local currency, in one currency, and they can't see what's happening all around the world. And it's by the time the crazy devaluation takes place, or tax rate, or drop in asset prices, they're wiped out to zero. And because it is one currency. So you're just even what you're saying right now, real estate is still a safe place, as long as somebody, or safe.
Be smart with it. Be smart with it.
Don't be all in.
Totally. Yeah.
And it wouldn't be a safe place if governments weren't going to print, but they're going to print. So
it's almost like we feel like we're in the real estate industry and we have to tell people, be careful, like, do this, it's the smart thing, but also it's the smart thing for all the wrong reasons. So be careful. You know, it's this weird world that I feel like we're playing in. We're like, yes, do this, but be careful. Don't over leverage, watch interest rates. It's going up for all the wrong reasons. Be careful, but still do it. You know, so it's kind of crazy, but we take that, Nick and I both take that very seriously. You know,
every investment advisor, every real estate play, when money is being manipulated, everything else is just a game. So money is being manipulated. The entire system requires more manipulation. It's just a Ponzi scheme. One day the Ponzi scheme is going to end. Right? It's the biggest Ponzi scheme in our lives, yet we don't recognize it because we've grown up in that system. And it's getting worse and worse and worse, and we don't recognize it. And we measure all of our wealth and everything else from this system that's really a Ponzi scheme. And so what are you supposed to do, right? You realize you're playing blackjack, you're playing roulette, right? and all of this stuff, and don't be all in on red.
Yeah, exactly. And what I appreciate about what you're doing, and I want to on your time here, so we'll wrap here. But what I appreciate about what you're doing is you're helping people open up their eyes so that they can see that next step and prepare for it now. And I know not everybody will be able to prepare themselves or will see what's coming, but that's what I really appreciate about what you're doing. So that I know how busy you are, you have a family, and for you to take the time to come on our show, I really appreciate it. And I want you to know that the feedback that we got from your first episode, people, I think, people, or some of our clients and the audience of this show, they really feel grateful that when you come on here. So I just really want to I really want to thank you for that, for sharing that. You're a busy guy. You can be doing many other things. You're talking to Parliament, and then you're coming on our show. So really appreciate that. So Jeff, we'll wrap here. I know The Price of Tomorrow is available on Amazon. If you're in our offices here, we keep copies of your book here, Jeff. We hand
Wow.
we hand out your copies of your book. So if you're around us and you need a copy of Jeff's book, you can pop into the office here and we'll gladly hand you a copy of Jeff. I should be careful what I say. We might run out of copies on something like that. But if you're around us, we'll hand out. That's how important I feel this information is. But on Amazon, you can get Jeff's book on the price of tomorrow. And then can you just share where to find your website, Twitter, whatever you want to share?
Probably Twitter is the best, at Jeff Booth on Twitter. That's probably the best.
Yeah, awesome. Jeff, thank you so much. Really, I really mean this. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks
Keep
very
doing what
much,
you're doing.
Tom.
Anything you need that we can help with at all, just please say the word.
And right back at you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
cool. Thanks, Jeff. Hey everyone, so hopefully you enjoyed that episode with Jeff. I always get a kick out of talking to Jeff. You can follow Jeff on Twitter. I think he shared his Twitter handle at the end of that episode, but it's just at Jeff Booth. So a great guy. He answers questions there on Twitter. If you reach out to him, just at Jeff Booth. Say hi, tell him you heard him on the podcast. And that'd be the best place to follow him. If you want to pick up a copy of his book, you can go to Amazon and get that. It's called The Price of Tomorrow. So that's The Price of Tomorrow on Amazon. And if you are listening to this and you want some more real estate specific information, you can go to rockstarinnercircle.com for everything that we are sharing with different Canadians and working right here with Canadians in the greater Toronto and Golden Horseshoe area to get different real estate, use different strategies on real estate, and to create cash flow with real estate. So you can get all the information around that at rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for this episode. Until next time, your life, your terms.